Divine creativity. That's what we're going to talk about today. I have a quotation for you. Ye children of my nature, fashion things. Take you the residue of what my art hath made, and let each fashion something which shall bear resemblance to his own nature. That's God speaking in the Korea Cosmo. Creativity in Hermetic thought is closely bound up with nous. And as I mentioned previously, nous is probably not well translated as intellect. Mind is a little better, depends on the context. But in a Hermetic context, I think we should translate nous as creative consciousness. We have a spark of creative consciousness just as the creator who gave it to us does, according to Hermetic stories. Nous is more than intellectual or rational activity, because nous actually contains and implies the soul's identity with the basic patterns of existence, the archetypal patterns all around us. And through nous, we can also contemplate the whole in imagination as a simultaneous totality. And finally, nous can perceive the great mystery, the unmanifest, the unborn, because it too is unmanifest. So what is creativity? If we looked at it depth psychologically for a moment, depth psychology being a relatively recent evolution of Hermeticism, and we drew on Carl Jung's work, he would undoubtedly say that it's closely bound up, and he did write this, with what emanates into consciousness from the unconscious. And I actually have a quote from him from The Spirit in Man, Art, and Literature. Jung wrote, "The creative process, so far as we are able to follow it at all," I like his taking account of the mysterious aspects of it. "The creative process, so far as we are able to follow it at all, consists in the unconscious activation of an archetypal image, and in elaborating and shaping this image into the finished work. By giving it shape, the artist translates it into the language of the present, and so makes it possible for us to find our way back to the deepest springs of life." When you think about great works of art, you can see the archetypal themes, the primordial images, motifs that animate them. They aren't reducible to that, but they're there. And so there's a lot of talk on the mental health side of the house about creativity and madness, to the point where it's become kind of a trope in the public mind. And I think, frankly, some of that's motivated by envy. But there is such a thing as being seized by an archetype. Jung talks about that too. And it's not always benign. Look at the example of Dr. Frankenstein, or anybody who gets seized by the creative daimon, to use an old word, that creative force that's bigger than the human mind, but gets into the human mind and makes weapons or makes something else destructive. So creativity isn't necessarily benign. It's all in how we wield it and what we do with it. And that's where things like the ethical aspect of Hermeticism come in. And although, if we think about creativity as art for a moment, although artistic products of different kinds can be heavily symbolic and even archetypal with those universal themes that pop up, they're not subject to fixed interpretations. And Jung was quite emphatic about that. Not even by the artist. It's not really the job of the artist to interpret their work. And many refuse to. Jung thought rightly. Oftentimes, there is a kind of open door in the artist's mind to the collective unconscious, to whatever's happening in collective awareness below the surface of it. And so artists, it's often said, are the barometers of the time and barometers of the time to come. So what appears in art now symbolically indicates what's ahead. And we see this all throughout history, and that includes scientific discoveries and achievements as well. So Hermeticism, however, actually moves beyond the archetypal, beyond the symbolic, by emphasizing that we are linked through nous to the creative activity of the cosmos. And so that's a connection that moves even beyond whether we call them archetypes, or as the Gnostics would have called them, archons and aeons, angels, planetary gods, what have you. We have a direct line according to Hermeticism. When creativity is blocked, a useful question to ask is who, whether in me or outside me, however you conceptualize it, who wants to be part of the story? Who isn't being heard? So when I've worked with my students around, for instance, writing blocks, I will ask them to do an internal inquiry about who the blocker is. Is the blocker a part of me that wants to protect me from whatever changes in my life the finished product will bring? Maybe it will bring me more public exposure, and I don't want that. Maybe it will bring me some sort of life change that I'm not ready to face yet. Maybe it will conflict my relationship with my family. There's lots of reasons to protect oneself. So oftentimes when our creativity feels blocked, it's because the blocker is protecting us. In which case, we can use our creativity to make them part of the story too, and to give them a voice in what it is that we want to create. Creativity, of course, is not limited to artists. We all have it. From the Hermetic perspective, it's grounded in the nous, the spark of the divine that we all come in with. So we create all the time novel configurations of all kinds of things. We give form to impulses that come from who knows where. And we all grow, to use the etymology of the English word create. It goes back to grow. And we can choose to grow all kinds of things: people, relationships, meanings, life paths, new innovations, original ways of thinking. And in a sense, all of these is like a miniature philosopher's stone, to take an image from the technical Hermetic side of the house, from alchemy. The philosopher's stone was thought to be this fabulous object that you could create through the alchemical process. And it would do things like transmute base metals like lead into silver or gold, or ordinary glass into gemstones. It could turn illness into health and short life into long life. It was a magical device. And so one alchemist, Gerhard Dorn, suggests, turn yourselves into living philosophical stones. We can even alchemize with very limited means. No matter how disastrous things are, there is usually left over some small margin of creative freedom by which we can take up an active stand toward what we face. And there's an old statement from the Gnostic texts that I think speaks to this very well, that I'll leave you with. When the light of the Sophia mixed with the darkness, it caused the darkness to shine. Thanks.